Good afternoon. Good afternoon. What's happening? This is Tiffany coming through here live in effect. Today, topic is going to be about Margaret Garner, aka Peggy. Since people want to get on the subject about Queen Zinga and what she has done and how she played her role into slavery, etc. I mean, giving this woman so many backlash and criticism, antagonizing her because pretty much of her gender and not what she did, but more so her gender. If they was to give the attack to Queen Zinga, they would give the same attack to Margaret Garner. And Margaret Garner was a lady that was born to slavery. Of course, she was a slave. However, she had a daughter, and the slave masters was going to come and get her daughter and take her back to the plantation. And what she did, she killed her daughter in front of them to let them know that I refuse to let my child go back on that slave plantation. I already killed my child in order than to take away her dignity and her freedom. And she wasn't the only parent that did that. There were people that was jumping off a boat committing suicide and taking their kids with them because they felt that it's better to die than to go through the brutality. And in her case, she felt that it was better for her daughter to die than to have to go through that brutality that she went through. But I want to get into her story. But I don't think a lot of people know this. The book called Beloved by the late Toni Morrison, was based off of this woman's life. So Beloved was one of the most popular books back in the 90s by Toni Morrison. It was very popular back then. I don't know. I'm not sure if they did a movie off that book, but I think there's a movie pertaining to that title. Anyways, this book is based off the life of Margaret Garner. It's based off her life and based off her experience. So, of course, it's fictional because the characters' names are fictional, but the story and setting, the events in the books is based off the real life character Margaret Garner. That's who it's based off of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get started with his biography. Okay. Let me go ahead and post up the information. So the story of Margaret Garner. So who was she? As a matter of fact, this is the artwork right here. So this is the woman right here. It's a painting. It's called The Modern Medea, was based on Garner's story by Tommy Satterwhite Nobles. This is his artwork right here, and it's based off the story of Garner. All right, here it is. So Margaret Garner, called Peggy, died in 1858. Was an enslaved African-American woman in the pre-Civil War America who killed her own daughter rather than allowing the child to be returned to slavery. Garner and her family had escaped enslavement in January of 1856 by traveling across the frozen Ohio River to Cincinnati. But they were apprehended by U.S. Marshals acting under the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Garner's defense attorney, John Joliffe, moved to have her tried for murder in Ohio to be able to get a trial in a free state and to challenge the fugitive slave law. Garner's story was the inspiration for the novel Beloved, which was written in 1987 by Nobel Prize winning author Toni Morrison, and its subsequent adaptation into a film of the same name starring Oprah Winfrey. So yes, there was a movie, and Oprah Winfrey played in the movie in 1998. And it says her early life. So Garner, described as a mulatto, was born a house slave to the Gaines family of Maplewood Plantation, Boone County, Kentucky. She may have been a daughter of the plantation owner John Pollard Gaines himself. In 1849, she married Robert Garner, an enslaved man. That December, the plantation and all the people enslaved there were sold to John P. Gaines' younger brother, Archibald K. Gaines. The Garner's first child, Thomas, was born in early 1850. Three of Garner's younger children, Samuel, Mary, and Priscilla, were described as mulattoes. Each was born 5 to 7 months after a child born to Archie Gaines and his wife. These light-skinned children were likely the children of Archibald Gaines, the only adult white male at Maplewood. The timing of the pregnancy suggests that the children were each conceived after Gaines' wife had become pregnant and was sexually was sexually unavailable to him. In contemporary account, abolitionist Levy Coffin described Margaret Garner at her arrest as a mulatto about 5 feet high. She appeared to be about 21 or 23 years old. She also had an old scar on the left side of her forehead and cheek, which she said had been caused when a white man struck me. Her two sons were about 4 and 6 years old. Her daughter, Mary, was 2.5, and baby girl Priscilla, an infant. All right, so escape and trial. On January 28, 1856, Robert and Margaret Garner, who was pregnant together with family members, escaped and fled to Storrs Township, a rural area just west of Cincinnati, along with several other enslaved families. Robert Garner had stolen his enslavers' horses and sledge along with his gun. 17 people were reported to have been in their party. In the coldest winter in 60 years, the Ohio River had frozen. At daybreak, the group crossed the ice in Boone County, Kentucky, just west of Covington, and escaped to Storr Township before dividing to avoid detection. The Garners and their 4 children, with Robert's father Simon and his wife Mary, made their way to the home of Margaret's uncle Joe Key, who had himself been formerly slave and who lived along Mill Creek below Cincinnati. The other 9 people in their party reached safe houses in Cincinnati and eventually escaped via the Underground Railroad to Canada. Kite went to abolitionist Levy Coffin for advice. Them escaped the city and told Kite to take the Garner group further west of the city where many free black people lived and to wait until night. So basically, so far they were trying to get away from the slave plantation, and they left from Kentucky, went straight to the Ohio River, and when they got to the Ohio River, then some of them dispersed to Canada. So a lot of these slaves were able to do that. That's how they was able to get to the Canada border, which is why you do have blacks over there in Canada now, because they are descendant of former slaves that came from the southern region. So many of them went from the south and migrated up to the Midwest region, like Ohio, etc., Illinois, etc., and they went over to the Canadian border for safety because Canada didn't really have a lot of the issues like United States did. So let's go ahead and continue. Slave catchers. Now, who were the slave catchers? Let's look that up. In the United States, a slave catcher was a person employed to track down and return escaped slaves to their enslavers. The first slave catchers in the Americas were active in European colonies in the West Indies during the 16th century. In the colony of Virginia and Carolina, slave catchers, as part of the slave patrol system, were recruited by Southern planters beginning in the 18th century to return fugitive slaves. The concept quickly spread to the rest of the 13 colonies. After the establishment of the United States, slave catchers continued to be employed in addition to being active in other countries which had not abolished slavery, such as Brazil. The activities of slave catchers from the American South became at the center of a major controversy in the lead up to the American Civil War. The Fugitive Slave Act required those living in the northern United States to assist slave catchers. Slave catchers in the United States ceased to be active with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. All right. So the slave catchers, they were employed by the slave planters go find slaves that had escaped the plantation and bring them back. But continue, it says slave catchers and U.S. Marshal found the Garners barricaded inside Kite's house before he returned. They surrounded the property and then stormed the house. Robert Garner fired several shots and wounded at least one deputy marshal. Margaret killed her 2-year-old daughter Mary with a butcher knife rather than see the child return to slavery. She had wounded her other children, preparing to kill them and herself when she was subdued by the posy. So Margaret killed her 2-year-old daughter, and she had wounded her other children, and she was going to kill herself to protect them from going back on the slave plantation. But we would not understand this because we have a mindset where, oh, she was just low down evil. She killed her kids. She should have been dealt with, and not understanding what type of pressure that our people were going through and what they had to deal with. So in this situation, you can tell slavery was very brutal. You could tell it was very harsh because otherwise this woman would not have a reason to want to kill her children and herself. Many people could not endure and survive through slavery. So when I hear people like Kanye West say things like slavery is a choice, it's really not a choice. It's not a choice. You don't get to choose to be a slave per se. You was forced into it. Now, people choose to die because they don't want to suffer from slavery, but you don't get to choose to be a slave. So people sit here and say, well, slavery is a choice. Our people had a choice of getting away from free. No, they didn't. Because that was the laws at that time period. Black people did not have laws to get away from slavery. Black people had to comply with that. So it was no rights for blacks, especially those who were enslaved. It was no rights for them. They were property. What could they really say? What could they couldn't really, they didn't have that much power. They had no type of power or control over what was whatever legislation or whatever laws were implemented. They had no power. Even if they were free, they still really had no power, because at that time white folks was making all the decision. They had the control. So people talking about, well, slavery is a choice. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no clue. That goes to show that they not understanding, that they're not educated enough. They sit there and listen to Kanye West and act like he's telling the truth, and he's really not, because he has no understanding. He has no understanding because he ain't studied. But then it goes on to say the entire group was taken to jail. The subsequent trial lasted for 2 weeks, after which the judge deliberated another 2 weeks. It was the longest and most complicated case of its kind. A typical fugitive slave hearing would have lasted less than a day. The core issue was whether the Garners would be tried as person and charged with the murder of their daughter, or tried as a property under the Fugitive Slave Act. On the Fugitive Slave Law. The defense attorney argued that Ohio's right to protect its citizens should take precedence. The slave catchers and owners argued for the precedence of the federal law over the state. The defense attempt to prove that Margaret Garner had been liberated under a former law covering slaves taken into free state for other work. Her attorney proposed that she be charged with murder so that the case would be tried in a free state, understanding that the governor would later pardon her. The prosecuting attorney argued that the federal fugitive slave law took proceedings over state murder charges. Over 1,000 people turned out each day to watch the proceedings. Lining the streets outside the courthouse, 500 men were deputized to maintain order in the town. The presiding judge, Peggy, ruled that federal fugitive warrants had supervening authority. Defense attorney John Julafe then tried a strategy of arguing that the Fugitive Slave Act violated the guarantee of religious freedom by compelling citizens to participate in evil by returning slaves. Peggy rejected this argument. All right, so then goes on down to say that on the closing day of the trial, the anti-slavery activist Lucy Stone took the stand to defend her earlier conversation with Margaret. The prosecution had complained. She spoke about and Margaret Garner's actions were driven by her master's abuse and the well-known abuse slaves faced nationwide. Women were known to practice infanticide to alleviate the burden of slavery from their children. In Garner's case, her children faced even more opposition due to her being mulattoes. Mulattoes were seen as a threat as well as a disgrace among the plantation and white families because the birth of mulatto children highlighted infidelity within the slave-owning families. They reminded the family of a perceived sin and were often beaten or sold. Garner underwent drastic measures to protect her children not only from the cruelty of the institution of slavery, but from the double threat due to the child's mulatto status. Wow, so this goes really deep. So this right here in this little paragraph already let us know that during the time women practiced infanticide. Infanticide means killing an infant. So women was already killing infants during that time period to keep them from enduring slavery. As a matter of fact, there were women during slavery that would eat cotton to keep from having children, to keep from conceiving children. So it was said to be at one time they would take some cotton off the field and they would shove the cotton down their mouth, or even not even the cotton, they would take the stem of the cotton and shove it down their mouth to keep from having babies. So it was their way of doing self-abortion. So before the abortion procedure came about, they would take the stem of the cotton and they would eat it to keep from being pregnant, and to prevent the pregnancy process, to go about having self-abortion. So these women were doing these things because they didn't want their children to be born into this type of lifestyle and to endure the things they had to do. So women didn't have any say so as far as if they wanted to have the baby or they wanted to get rid of the baby, etc. It was like this: if you got raped, remember, if you're a slave woman and you got raped, you don't have no say so. You had no choice but to keep the baby of your rapist. That's just what it was. But now you have a choice as a woman. If you've been sexually violated, you can either terminate your pregnancy, or you can give the child for the adoption, or you can have the child and you can raise the child. You have options now. But at that time period, you didn't have no options. It's just what it was. That's just what it is. It is what it is. You was forced to have a child. So if you got pregnant by the slave master, you was going to have a slave master baby. And that's just all to it. There was no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Because you was a property. You had no rights. You was a breeding farm. Okay. But then the sad part about some people being mulatto, and see, a lot of us think that mulattoes or people who were biracial, they got the best treatment. Well, yeah, they did, but at the same time, they really didn't. During slavery, they were considered as the threat of the family because the white slave master, in particular, having sex with the African slave woman and bearing children with her, it became a problem with the family. So the family had the issue with, particularly on his side, especially, they had the issue. The wife would be upset about that. Oh, you done slept with the damn slave, and you done had this child with her, and you done had children with these women. But the slave master didn't see it as, oh, those are my kids and I'm going to take responsibility of them. No, he was just looking for more work, more labor. So if that means snatching one of them African slaves off the damn field and take them into a room, lock them up somewhere, and force them to have sex and impregnate them and then put them back on the field, if that's what it took, then that's what it was going to take. Because all they were thinking about was labor, economics. They didn't care. That's all. They didn't care nothing about these women or their humanity. All they was looking at is more workers. The more slaves we have, the more economics we'll build. But mulatto children, hey, brother Anthony, how you doing? Hey, brother Anthony, how you doing? How you doing? It's been a while. But mulatto children was looked at as the problem. They were looking at it as a threat. So yeah, there was the blacks over here that was like, oh, they gonna get privileged because they're going to be in the house with the slave masters and etc. And then the slave masters family over here like, oh, these children belong to Negroes, and the father or the patriarch slept with this woman over here. Yeah, so, and I wouldn't even be surprised to find out that the slave masters done slept with their own children to produce more children. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there was incestation going on as well. But I have yet to even find proof of that. If, as far as if there was any children that was born to a family of incestation during slavery, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out if that was the case, because again, you gotta look at the mindset of how the business. You gotta look at it from the mindset of what slavery was about. It wasn't about love or hate. It was about economics. It was about business. That's what it was all about, the business. But anyways, I want to get back to I want to get down to here what says Margaret Garner was not immediately tried for murder, but she was forced to return to a slave state along with Robert and their youngest child, a daughter of about 9 months old. When Ohio authorities got extradition warrant for Gardner to try her for murder, they were unable to find her for the arrest. Archibald K. Gaines, her enslaver, kept moving her between cities in Kentucky. Ohio officials missed finding Margaret in Covington by a few hours, misapprehended her again in Frankfort, and finally caught up with her enslaver in Louisville, only to the Gardeners then disappeared from the site. In 1870, a reporter from the Cincinnati Chronicles found Robert Garner and gathered more about his life. Robert and Margaret Garner had worked in New Orleans and in 1857 were sold to Judge Dewitt Clinton Bohan for plantation labor at Tennessee Landing, Mississippi. Robert said Margaret had died in 1858 of typhoid fever or typhoid fever. It's an epidemic in the valley. He said that before she died, Margaret urged him to never marry again in slavery, but to live in hope of freedom. Right, so she had typhoid fever. Let's see, what is a typhoid fever? So typhoid, also known as typhoid, is a disease caused by Salmonella serotype typhi bacteria. Symptoms may vary from mild to severe and usually begin 6 to 30 days after exposure. Often there is a gradual onset of a high fever over several days. This is commonly accompanied by weakness, abdominal pain, constipation, headaches, and mild vomiting. Some people develop a skin rash with rose-colored spots. In severe cases, people may experience confusion. Wow. It says without treatment, Symptoms may last weeks or months. Diarrhea is uncommon. Other people may carry the bacterium without being affected, but they are still able to spread the disease to others. Typhoid fever is a type of enteric fever along with paratyphoid fever. So far as enterica typhi is also known to infect and replicate within humans. Wow, so she had a particular fever that she could not even get rid of. And the last message that she gave to her husband was to never marry again in slavery, but to live in hope of freedom. Wow. And that's an inspirational message that comes from your spouse. Very inspirational. Memorialized. Garner's life story was basis of Frances Harper's 1859 poem Slave Mother, A Tale of Ohio. She also inspired Kentucky painter Thomas Satterwhite Noble's 1867 painting The Modern Medea. Medea was a Greek woman in Greek mythology who killed her own children. The painting, owned by Cincinnati manufacturer Procter and Gamble Corporation, was presented as a gift to the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, where it remains on permanent display. And also, Toni Morrison was inspired to write her Pulitzer Prize winning novel Beloved in 1987. Morrison also wrote the libretto for the opera Margaret Garner in 2005, composed by Richard Danapour. Other fiction writing inspired by Garner's story include John Gelof's Belly Scott, 1856, N.K. Jemisin, The Fifth Season, 2015, and K.A. Simpson, A Covenant's Lament, which came out in 2017. Wow. So there's the citation here at the very bottom. And then here's the references at the very bottom of the page and the external links also as well. So yeah, this is the information about Margaret Garner. And I want to show you guys a book. Thank you, Brother Anthony. I want to show you guys this book by Toni Morrison. So if you guys don't have it, I would suggest you get it. So this book right here is called Beloved, a novel by Toni Morrison. This book came out in 1987. This is one of her most popular book that was ever written. All right, so let's see. It says 60 million and more. I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved. Romans 9:25. All right. So if you guys don't have it, you guys should check it out. This book is based off the life of Margaret Garner. And then the movie came out in 1998 called Beloved with Oprah Winfrey. So you guys should also look at that movie if you guys haven't seen the movie. I'm gonna look it up myself. So one day I'm gonna be able to watch it. But I never, to be honest, I never knew that this book was based on this individual. I never knew about it, because I thought Beloved was just another fiction novel of Toni Morrison, but I didn't know that it was based off the story of a slave woman named Margaret Garner. I never knew until today. So I was surprised to really find out myself. But only thing I'm here to do is make sure I share the information with people. And whatever you guys do, that is your choice. That's your prerogative. At the end of the day, what's more important is make sure that the history is put out there. That's what's more important. So you asked, Beloved is older than you, right? Yes, Beloved is older than me. The book came out in 1987. So it came out 2 years before I was born. So yeah, Beloved came out 2 years before I was born. And that was the most popular book that was written by Miss Morrison, the late Toni Morrison. So that was her most popular book. That was the most critically acclaimed novel. during those time periods from the late 80s, early 90s. That was the most popular book. But yeah, we have to give account on history. So when we deal with historical information, we have to be able to have an open mind and be able to make better assessment instead of just be so quick to bring about antagonism, because it's so easy to get into your emotions or in your feelings and just to antagonize an individual without really having a proper consensus and having a better understanding of what really took place in those particular time periods where especially an event that was regarding to slave activities or slavery in itself or any crucial situation. You never really know what a person is in the predicament of doing. So going back to what I was stating yesterday about Queen Azinga, we don't know what type of position she was placed in. Okay. We know that, yes, she was in a position of power and she was considered as the queen. She was considered as the queen. She was in a position of power. She was in a position of power. Okay? So if you're in that particular power, right, and you're in that particular position and you're running a government, you're not running a community, you're not running a village, you're running a society. You're running a country. Okay, she was running a country. So now this is a whole nother ball game you gotta play. You deal with foreigners that's not even from your land, that's not even from the continent. Now, it's not a justification for what was taking place, but it's to have an understanding of why it took place. No, you don't have to like it, because history is not going to be something that's going to always make you feel accommodated or make you feel good. It's not going to always do that. So even with the story about Margaret Garner, it was not a feel-good story. That was history. That was a life event. That was something that was dealing with a person who was going through a real life tragic situation, who was traumatized. Okay. And she felt the only way to save her family was to kill him, because she was under a traumatic situation. So for those of us who may say, well, I would never do this, I would never do that, this, that, and other, you don't know what you might do. You never know what type of pressure you might go through. And so it's not making an excuse and justification saying it's acceptable, because it's not acceptable, but you have to have an understanding of what make a person do certain things or what type of pressure are they under. It's just like if somebody was growing up in a family full of mobs, or family that's based on crime organization or drug cartel. If you raise, that's hard for you to do. All right, I'm back. But as I was stating before my connection went out, if you grew up in a family that's based on crime organization, right? Or let's say you grew up in a mob and your family is under the radar. For you as a child growing up in the midst of that chaos, it's hard for you to live a regular life or to be as civilian as your counterpart. It's hard because you live under that. You was born into the mess. So you become a part of the mess. So now you have to make those tough decisions as far as what you're going to do. If things was to go wrong with someone that's the head figure in the household, whether it be your mother or your father, and the torch was passed on down to you, now you have to figure out a solution, what you're going to do. What you going to do? How you going to go about continuing the family legacy? How you going to go about diffusing the situation? It's not just like something you can just say, okay, I can walk away from this and I can let this go and it's over with and there's no consequences. No. So it doesn't always work the way that we think it should. Now, from people that's on the outside, we don't understand because we're looking from an outside point of view. We don't understand why that person went out there and committed so many heinous crimes. We just know that we want to get rid of this person that committed this heinous crimes. And this person going to have to pay the price for that. We don't know if that person was forced to do it. We don't know if that person was under pressure to do it because of the things that has been placed upon them, or they was under some type of constraint to do it. We don't know what's really going on personally behind closed doors with them. We just know we looking from outside in, like that person committed this crime, that person needs to be locked up. This is one of the reasons why in the criminal justice fields, they have what's called a forensic psychologist. They have the forensic psychologist there for a reason. Because what the job of the forensic psychologist is to go back and study the origins of the individual. They have to go way back. They have to look at from the time that person was born or how things was from when they was young as a child all the way up to now. Because what happened in your childhood that led up to what happened to now? What incident took place? That's why if you ever go to a psychiatrist, they always ask you a question, what was your childhood like? Why do they ask that question? Because they're trying to pull back the layers. They're trying to find context clues as to what leads up to a person's behavior problem or lead up to a person's action. What was it in that person's childhood that triggered them? So they go back, they look at both the good and the bad. If they can't find out what happened in that person's childhood, then they're going to ask about their adolescenthood. What was it like when they was growing up as teenagers? Can't find something there, then they'll go into the adult life. What happened in their adult life? In the life that you spent as an adult, what happened to you? So that's one thing. Have to have the forensic psychologist there to find out, to investigate on that person. They'll ask these people particular questions as far as what made them commit the crime, why did they commit a crime, et cetera, et cetera. They do all these things. They have to do those interrogation process. That's a part of their job. That's a part of their job. They have to get the forensic anthropologists and forensic psychologists there because they have to look at the origin of what took place, what happened, why did the individual commit the crime, how did they go about doing it? Did they premeditate it or did they just act at that moment? What happened? They have to go into all the details. Okay. So again, this is no way of saying what people are doing is acceptable, it's okay, but we have to be able to pull back the layers on individual behavior. Even the people that enslaved us, Even with the people that enslaved us, we have to pull back the layers on what made them enslave us. Why did they do it? Just like when we deal with these racist ass crackers, we gotta understand, well, what made them so racist? Did they grow up and learn about racist ideology from their parents? Who did they get this from? Did they have a bad experience dealing with black people growing up? What made them so damn racist? So we gotta study humans' behavior. That's all I'm saying. We have to deal with the human behavior and how humans adapt to their environment, to nature. But anyways, that's all I have for this video. And I will come back later on to do another topic. But this topic is not going to be dealing with Black history, of course. It's going to be dealing with the neuroscience. So just to give you guys a little glimpse on what the topic is. As a matter of fact, hold on. It comes from Psych Post. All right, so when I come back later on, I'm going to do a topic about neuroscience research finds brain structure difference in men and women are not strongly linked to behavior differences. So I'm going to come back and deal with this neuroscience things and about the brain structure, etc. So just stay tuned for that later. Anyways, this your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off. With that being said, peace and power elevation. Thank you, Brother Anthony, for coming through. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, share my channel, check out my video content and all this great stuff, and I will connect with you all later. All right. So until next time, peace. I'm out.